What would happen if a CEO went undercover as an ordinary employee and discovered that his own store was being run through fear? The sound of the barcode scanner clicked rhythmically in the strangely quiet atmosphere of store number 7. That morning, everything seemed to be going as usual until a harsh voice cut through the heavy air, sharp as a slap across the face. "Tears won't fix your pathetic life." The words echoed across the checkout aisles, loud enough for a few customers standing 2 aisles away to turn their heads. The man who spoke, Victor Hale, the store manager, stood tall at checkout counter 4, gripping his clipboard tightly as if it gave him the authority to judge others. Across from him, a young woman with hastily tied hair, her face flushed and eyes red, rimmed, tried to hold back her emotions. Her name was Emily Carter, a cashier known for being diligent and careful, one of the best in the store. Her hand trembled slightly as she scanned the next item, but her eyes tried to remain calm despite the public humiliation. I'm fine, sir," Emily replied softly, her voice small and shaky, as if confessing to a crime. Victor smirked coldly, speaking just loudly enough for those nearby to hear. "Fine, huh? Then act more professional if you don't want to lose your hours next month." With that, he turned and strode away as if he had just completed an important task, leaving behind glances filled with sympathy, mixed with fear from her co-workers. At the end of the frozen aisle, a man stood still, his eyes fixed on the entire scene that had just unfolded. Dressed in a simple checkered shirt and a baseball cap that shaded part of his face, he looked like just another morning shift employee. But in reality, this was Nathan Cole, the founder and CEO of Cole's Market, the grocery chain he had built from nothing over 2 decades ago. He had once promised himself that in any store bearing his name, employees would always be treated with respect and dignity. Yet now, in one of his own branches, that promise was being publicly trampled. Nathan didn't step forward, didn't interfere, just watched silently. His eyes didn't just see a young woman being humiliated. He saw a broken promise to thousands of employees. In that moment, his heart tightened. He had received reports about declining customer satisfaction and increasing staff turnover, but nothing compared to witnessing this with his own eyes. And when Emily's eyes flickered with resignation, the look of someone who had learned to swallow her tears, Nathan understood this wasn't just a bad day at work. This was a system rotting from within. He took a deep breath and slowly moved to the next aisle, hiding his clenched jaw. He couldn't intervene yet. He needed to see more, to truly understand what was happening beneath the calm surface of store number 7. But inside, one thing was already certain. Nothing would be the same after today. 3 days before witnessing the painful scene at checkout counter 4, Nathan Cole had stood silently for a long time in the parking lot of store number 7. He wore an old jacket bought from a second-hand shop, holding a neatly folded resume in his hand, and the name written on it was not Nathan Cole, but Adam Ross. From a distance, no one would have recognized him as the CEO who had graced the cover of prestigious business magazines, the man who had built the Cole's Market empire from nothing. But he wasn't there to be recognized. He was there to blend into the crowd like any new employee, to hear the things that internal reports would never reveal. For months, reports had been pouring into headquarters. Stable revenue, but a noticeable drop in customer satisfaction, and an unusually high turnover rate, especially at stores that had once been rated outstanding. The HR department and regional supervisors explained everything with familiar excuses. Regular shift changes, temporary staff shortages, increasing workload. But Nathan was not easily convinced. He had once stood behind a cash register himself, once stacked boxes on shelves with his own hands in the early days of building the business. He knew that numbers could be manipulated, but the true atmosphere inside a store could never be faked. Everything became urgent when an anonymous letter was sent directly to his personal inbox. Just 6 short words, no signature. "Please help. It's getting worse." He read those words over and over through the night, picturing the faces of employees he had once shaken hands with, people who had once proudly worn the Coles Market uniform. And he knew that if he didn't come himself, every answer he got would only be polite lies. So he came here, disguised as a nameless new hire. On his first morning, he was assigned to clean the stockroom and mop the hallway floors. Marcus Lee, a young man who looked both busy and cautious, showed him around. Marcus spoke quickly, but before leaving he left Nathan with a warning that lingered in his mind. "Just remember one thing. Stay away from Victor Hale. Around here, that's how you keep your job." It seemed like a harmless comment, but it was the first real warning bell. Nathan quietly went about his work, his eyes observing every movement around him. He noticed an unusual silence. The casual chatter between shifts that he had seen at other stores was almost non-existent here. Forced smiles disappeared instantly whenever Victor appeared in the aisles. And every time Victor carried that clipboard, everyone lowered their heads as if that board alone determined their fate. Standing in the middle of an aisle stacked high with boxes, Nathan understood that the letter hadn't exaggerated. This wasn't just an underperforming store. This was a place where fear had become a way of life, and Victor Hale was at the heart of it. But to uncover the whole truth, Nathan needed patience. He needed to see everything with his own eyes before making his move. Monday morning began like any other at store number 7. The cold white lights reflected off the polished tile floor, but the air inside was so heavy you could feel it with every step. Nathan Cole, under the name Adam Ross, pushed a floor sweeper down the main aisle, his eyes scanning quickly, taking everything in without drawing attention. He didn't need to hear anyone speak to understand one thing. People here worked like machines, not like human beings. The employees moved stiffly, their eyes avoiding contact with one another. Occasionally, Nathan caught snippets of small talk, but they died instantly the moment Victor Hale appeared in a corner of the store. He walked slowly, one hand gripping a clipboard, the other tucked into his pocket, his eyes sweeping the room as if he were taking inventory of both merchandise and people. Every time he showed up, the tension thickened. One employee, who had misplaced a carton of milk, scrambled to fix it, her face pale as if she had committed a serious crime. In the staff break room, Nathan sat in a quiet corner, holding a bland cup of coffee the others seemed too accustomed to complain about. Whispered voices floated through the room between 2 young women sitting close together. Yesterday, Victor yelled at Emily in front of customers again, just because she paused for a few seconds to figure out how to answer a question. Another voice responded, lower this time. "I think she's only staying for her kid. Otherwise, who could put up with this for long?" The words made Nathan pause, and the image of Emily's tear streaked eyes from the previous day flashed vividly in his mind. He kept observing and realized the fear wasn't just in whispered conversations. It was in the smallest details. Smiles vanishing the moment a door opened, conversations cut short when Victor's footsteps echoed in the hallway. Even Marcus Lee, the young man who had been friendly with Nathan on his first day, completely changed whenever Victor entered. Marcus lowered his head, barely daring to breathe, his hands gripping a box as though dropping it would cost him his next paycheck. Nathan quietly memorized every expression, every word. He knew that a normal work environment could be stressful, but it should never turn employees into people who lived in constant fear. What worried him most were people like Emily, those who had likely endured this oppressive atmosphere for far too long just to hold on to a meager job. Nathan tightened his grip on the sweeper handle, a flicker of determination crossing his eyes. He needed to look deeper, to understand everything before making any move. Because what he was witnessing now was only the surface of a system rotting from the inside out. That afternoon, Nathan stood at the end of the spice aisle, pretending to arrange jars of sea salt while his eyes were fixed on checkout lane number 4. Emily Carter was working there, every movement she made capturing his full attention. The young woman moved quickly, precisely, almost mechanically, yet every motion carried a tension, as if the slightest mistake could cost her dearly. Her face seemed devoid of emotion, maintaining only a thin, polite smile for customers, a smile that disappeared the moment they turned away. Nathan studied her more closely and noticed something different. Emily wasn't just working hard. She was working cautiously, like someone constantly bracing for an unexpected storm. When a customer asked where the cookies were, Emily didn't just point. She left her station and personally guided the customer to the right aisle. But as soon as the customer was out of sight, her smile vanished, replaced by a blank, exhausted stare. The moment that stayed with Nathan the most was when Emily discreetly pulled a small, worn piece of paper from the pocket of her apron, its creases showing it had been folded and unfolded many times. She looked at it for only a few seconds before quickly tucking it back, as if afraid of being caught. The moment was so brief that anyone not paying close attention would have missed it. Nathan couldn't see what was written, but the look of quiet reverence in her eyes said everything. It wasn't a receipt or a work schedule. It was something far more important. Something that kept her holding on to this job. Something she couldn't afford to lose. That evening, in the break room, Nathan sat quietly in a corner, listening as 2 employees whispered to each other just beyond the door. A young woman's voice murmured, "Poor Emily. Victor yelled at her again yesterday in front of customers. Just because she paused for a second, she was probably thinking about her son." Another voice answered, soft and full of sympathy. "She's only here for her boy. She told Ava once if she quit, she wouldn't have enough money to buy his asthma medicine." The words hit Nathan like a blade twisting in his chest. He looked around the worn-out break room, wondering how long these people had been living under such pressure, forced to endure just to survive. Emily wasn't just working to make a living, she was fighting to keep hope alive for her son. Nathan clenched his fist, anger and sorrow mixing inside him. Someone like Emily, hard-working, dedicated, should have been valued, not crushed under insults and an indifferent system. He looked out the window, the supermarket lights reflecting off the glass like a silent reminder. Things had gone too far. He needed to know the full truth, and he needed to act. But not yet. He had to stay in character, because only by understanding the problem down to its roots could he hope to change it completely. That evening, in a small rented room less than a block away from the supermarket, Nathan sat at an old wooden table, a stack of documents he had quietly collected over the past few days, spread out in front of him. The dim yellow light cast over his face, highlighting the tension in his features, his deep eyes fixed intently on the laptop screen. Beneath the cheap jacket and the fake name, Adam Ross, he was still CEO Nathan Cole, and more importantly, he still had access to the company's internal data system, a fact no one at this store suspected. The numbers were clear. Charts tracking each employee's working hours, weekly shift change notes. Nathan scrolled past dozens of names, but his eyes stopped when Emily Carter's name appeared. His jaw tightened as he noticed a pattern of unusual cuts. From 34 hours per week, reduced to 22, then 15, and recently, just 11 hours. An employee with such a strong performance record should have been given more hours, not systematically stripped of them. He continued reviewing and saw Ava Torres's name, another sales associate, a single mother, displaying the same pattern. Anyone with small children, or anyone who had dared to speak up about management practices in this store, had their hours cut, gradually and deliberately. Looking at those cold, lifeless numbers, Nathan felt as if he were staring at invisible wounds, slicing away at people's lives, not by coincidence, but by calculated cruelty. He leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath to contain the anger boiling in his chest. This wasn't just poor management. This was a weapon, and Victor Hale was the one wielding it to punish the vulnerable. Every hour cut wasn't just a number. It was a skipped meal, a prescription left unfilled, an overdue electricity bill. And Emily, the woman counting every penny to keep her son's asthma medication stocked, was the clearest victim of this economic weapon. Nathan closed the laptop, but the image of those red highlighted numbers stayed in his mind like blood stains on a report. There was no doubt left. What was happening here was a subtle form of violence, economic violence through control. He knew that tomorrow he would have to continue playing his part as an ordinary employee. But inside, the decision had already been made. Victor Hale would pay the price, and this system would be dismantled from its very roots. The sky had already faded into twilight when the supermarket closed for the night. Nathan sat quietly in the old rental car, parked in a distant corner of the lot, where the faint yellow glow of the parking lights barely cut through the thin mist. He waited patiently, not as a part-time worker finishing his shift, but for another reason entirely. He needed to witness firsthand the things that no number in the system could ever reveal. Around 7 o'clock, Emily Carter emerged from the side entrance of the supermarket. She wore a worn-out cardigan, her shoulders slightly hunched, as if carrying the weight of an exhausting day. In her arms was an old handbag, its frayed edges pressed close to her body, as though it were the most precious possession she had left. Nathan watched her through the rearview mirror, his chest tightening as she stopped by a beat-up silver car at the far end of the lot. She opened her bag, pulled out a small wallet, and turned it upside down, letting loose coins tumble into her palm. She counted them over and over, again and again, her desperate eyes silently pleading for the coins to somehow multiply. Then suddenly she froze, her fingers closing tightly around the coins, her shoulders trembling once. Just a moment later, silent tears spilled down her face. Emily turned her head away, but under the dim light, Nathan could clearly see her small figure slump into the driver's seat, burying her face in her hands, crying quietly as if she had held those emotions back for far too long. She was no longer just an employee in a report with reduced working hours. She was a mother drowning in despair, unsure how she could keep fighting through life. Nathan sat motionless in his car, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that the veins on his knuckles stood out. He had faced countless crises in his career, had read hundreds of reports on staffing and profits, but no number had ever made him feel this suffocated. Emily didn't deserve this, and neither did the hundreds of other employees like her. He had promised, on the very first day of founding Coles Market, that no employee would ever work in fear, that no one would be judged for their circumstances. But that promise had been betrayed, and he knew he was the one who had to make it right. He sat there for a long time, until the parking lot lights began to dim. Before starting the car, Nathan took a deep breath, as if etching the image of Emily's bowed head into his memory. Tomorrow, he would no longer be Adam Ross, the nameless part-time worker. Tomorrow, everything would change. The next morning, the atmosphere inside store number 7 was heavier than usual. The sound of barcode scanners beeped sporadically in the silence, as if everyone was waiting for something inevitable to happen. At exactly 8:07 a.m., the main doors swung open. Every employee turned toward the entrance, and then froze. The person walking in was not Adam Ross, the quiet part-time worker they had grown used to, but Nathan Cole, the founder and CEO of Coles Market, dressed in a sharp navy suit and carrying an unwavering determination in his eyes. Nathan walked slowly down each aisle, the sound of his shoes echoing distinctly against the polished floor. He did not smile. He did not greet anyone. His eyes swept across the rows of employees, pausing finally on Victor Hale, who stood by the checkout counter, clipboard in hand. Victor looked up, his brow furrowed for a moment in confusion, but he quickly straightened, wearing the same air of confidence that had long cemented his authority in the store. "We need to talk," Nathan said, his voice deep and decisive. The entire supermarket went silent. Employees seemed to hold their breath as Nathan strode directly toward Victor. Victor forced a thin smile, his voice stiff. "Mr. Cole, I didn't know you'd be coming today. Is there a problem?" Nathan did not answer immediately. He stared straight into Victor's eyes, his voice cold but firm. "I've been here for the past 3 days. I've seen how you treat your employees, how you've turned this place into a machine that runs on fear. And more importantly, I've seen the data, how you've systematically cut hours for employees who dared to speak up, or for those who simply slowed down for a moment to catch their breath." A ripple of hushed whispers passed through the staff. Victor's face flushed as he snapped back. "I've done what was necessary to maintain discipline. If you give them too many privileges, they'll get complacent. They'll start thinking this place owes them something." Nathan cut him off, his tone sharp as steel. "You think giving a mother extra hours so she can buy medication for her asthmatic son is a privilege? You think turning dedicated employees into fearful shells is the right way to run this store? You are dead wrong, Victor, and you will be held accountable for it." Victor opened his mouth to argue, but Nathan gave him no chance. He held out his hand. His voice clipped. "The keys, right now." The entire store was silent. A long moment passed before Victor smirked bitterly, his eyes flashing with defiance, though his hand trembled slightly as he pulled the ring of keys from his pocket. He placed them into Nathan's hand, his tone dripping with resentment. "You're making a mistake. Let's see how your employees behave when they think they have power." Nathan's gaze remained steady as he replied simply, "No, Victor. I'm giving them back something they should have had all along. Respect." Victor turned and stormed out, his shoes striking the floor with sharp, angry thuds. Behind him, no one clapped, no one cheered. But in that silence, Nathan could feel something shift. For the first time, it was no longer fear that lingered in the air, but the spark of hope quietly beginning to take hold. After Victor left, the atmosphere inside store number 7 remained strangely silent. Every employee stood frozen, no one daring to speak, as if they still couldn't believe the man who once held absolute power there was truly gone. Nathan stood in the middle of the checkout area, his eyes scanning every face, eyes that were filled with fear, but also glimmers of hope. He took a deep breath, his voice calm but resonating through the room. "I know that in these past weeks, you've been working under pressure that no one should ever have to endure. I have witnessed it with my own eyes, and I am sorry for allowing this to happen in a store that bears my name." The room seemed to hold its breath at every word he spoke. Nathan continued, "Starting today, any hours unfairly cut will be restored immediately. And more than that, you will be reimbursed for every hour taken from you in recent weeks. No one should ever have to wonder if they will have enough hours to feed their family." Small murmurs began to ripple through the room, some employees exchanging glances, their astonishment clear. Nathan's eyes turned toward checkout counter number 4, where Emily Carter stood gripping the edge of the counter as if trying to steady herself. Nathan walked toward her, his voice softening. "Emily Carter." Emily's eyes widened when she heard her name, her tear-filled gaze lifting to meet Nathan's, full of confusion. He stopped in front of her, his gaze firm yet warm. "Emily, I've seen the way you work. You are not only hard-working, but you care about customers, about your co-workers, even when you've been treated unfairly. Someone like you should never be looked down upon. You should be given the chance to lead. The assistant manager position is vacant, and I want you to take it, starting today." The room seemed to explode in a silent wave of emotion. Emily's eyes widened, her lips parted, but no words came out. Only tears streaming freely down her cheeks. She shook her head slightly, her voice trembling. I don't know if I can." Nathan cut her off with a small, reassuring smile. "You've been doing it for a long time already, Emily. You've kept this store running through its worst days. Now it's time you finally have a title that reflects what you've done." In that moment, Emily nodded gently, tears falling, but a genuine smile breaking across her face. The first real smile since Nathan had walked into the store. Applause erupted, hesitant at first, then growing stronger and spreading across the room. Marcus, Ava, and the other employees began smiling, as though a heavy weight had finally been lifted from their shoulders. Nathan stood there, letting the sound of clapping fill the air, because he knew he didn't need to say anything more. Those weren't just cheers for him. They were for themselves, for the dignity they had finally gotten back. The next morning, for the first time in months, the atmosphere inside store number 7 was no longer suffocating. Morning sunlight streamed through the large glass windows, casting a warm glow on faces that no longer seemed weighed down by tension. Emily Carter stood in the staff break room, holding a newly updated shift schedule in her hands. She wore a light blue shirt, her hair tied neatly back, and the usual timidness that once defined her was gone. In its place was a quiet confidence, mixed with a hint of nervousness. She knew she was about to begin a new chapter, not just as an assistant manager, but as someone determined to change the way this store was run. Taking a deep breath, she placed the schedule on the table in front of everyone and spoke, her voice calm but firm. "I know you've all been carrying far too much for far too long. That ends today. This new schedule isn't just based on sales, it's based on fairness. If you're a single parent, if you're studying, or if you have a valid reason, your hours will be adjusted accordingly. From now on, we support each other. No one has to work in fear anymore." A silence hung in the room, the employees exchanging glances as if they couldn't believe what they had just heard. Then Gloria, the oldest cashier, broke the silence with a hesitant smile. "So does this mean I won't have to work 6 Sundays in a row anymore?" Emily's lips curved into a small smile, and she replied with a hint of humor, "Only if you win the lottery." The witty response drew a burst of laughter, a rare sound in a place that for months had been filled only with hushed whispers and worry. For the rest of the morning, Emily walked through the store, checking each aisle and speaking to every employee. When she stopped beside Marcus Lee, who was carefully arranging boxes of cereal, she said gently, "Marcus, next week you'll be moving back to customer service. I need patient people who know how to listen working there." Marcus looked up, eyes wide in surprise. "Really? But Victor always said I wasn't fit for that position." Emily smiled, her gaze steady. "Victor isn't here anymore. You are. That's what matters." Later that day, as the store quieted and customers trickled out, Emily found herself stopping in front of the staff bulletin board. A new handwritten note had been pinned up beside a photo collage of employees smiling together. It read, "No one stands alone here." Emily smiled, then slowly added a small note of her own right beneath it. "Especially not on our watch." She stood there for a long moment, looking at the simple words, her heart filled with a feeling both familiar and new. This was no longer Victor Hale's store. This was now a place where people worked together, shared burdens, and trusted one another. And that, at last, was the true spirit Nathan Cole had envisioned from the very first day he founded Cole's Market. 2 weeks later, Nathan returned to store number 7, this time not under the name Adam Ross, and not as a CEO arriving to manage a crisis, but simply as an observer. He walked slowly across the parking lot, his hands in his pockets, letting everything unfold naturally before his eyes. From the entrance, Nathan immediately noticed the difference. The tense faces and heavy footsteps were gone, replaced by soft laughter and natural greetings exchanged between employees. Marcus Lee, the young man who had once been pushed to the back room, now stood outside in the parking lot, helping an elderly woman load her grocery bags into the trunk of her car. He chatted with her, smiling warmly, his movements gentle, as if he was doing it purely out of kindness rather than obligation. Inside the store, Eva Torres held an inventory clipboard, patiently guiding a new employee on how to arrange products. She no longer looked timid, her steps were firm, and her voice carried confidence. Nathan stopped near checkout counter number 4. There stood Emily Carter, her hair neatly tied back, her eyes bright, and a genuine smile lighting up her face. She was no longer the anxious young woman who had once trembled under Victor Hale's scrutiny, but a true leader. Nathan stood quietly as Emily bent down to help a young mother juggling 2 small children. She handed one of the kids a star-shaped sticker from her pocket, making the boy burst into giggles. That wasn't part of any customer service manual. It was natural kindness, something Nathan had always believed was the true heart of Cole's Market. When Emily had a brief moment free, Nathan approached her. She looked up, slightly surprised, but quickly smiled. Nathan nodded slightly. "You've done very well, Emily. This store, it's so much better now." Emily looked a little shy, her eyes shimmering with emotion, and she answered softly, "I just did what needed to be done." They only needed someone to believe things could be better. Nathan smiled, his nod calm yet full of pride. "You didn't just believe, Emily. You made them believe." He turned to leave, saying nothing more. There was no need for oversight, no need for speeches filled with management jargon. Store number 7 no longer needed a CEO to direct every step. It already had a real leader. Someone from within who understood every struggle, every person here. As Nathan stepped outside, the afternoon sunlight glinted off the Cole's Market sign, reflecting brightly on a small banner placed just beside it, "Where people come first." For the first time in many years, that slogan was no longer just a marketing phrase. It had returned to its original meaning, a promise fulfilled, a value protected. Nathan took a deep breath, walking away with a lighter heart. He knew he hadn't just saved a store. He had given these people back something far more valuable, their dignity. True leadership is not about control, but about protecting and giving back dignity to the people who keep the business alive. A system is only truly strong when the people working within it feel respected. If you agree that people must always come first, hit like and subscribe to help spread these meaningful values. And don't forget to leave a comment with the 3 words, "Hold dignity," so we can remind each other of the most important thing.